There are very few franchises that encapsulate the culture of the late 90s and early 2000s, quite like Pokémon. The first generation, red, blue, and yellow, quickly swept the globe, providing kids and adults alike with an immersive experience that the world hasn't seen since. A global culture shock, appropriately dubbed Pokémania. These games quickly became the best-selling Game Boy games of all time, and spawned what is the highest-grossing franchise in history. So it's no surprise that in recent memory, the only thing that has made people around the world react in a similar way was the announcement and release of Pokémon Go, an AR game that launched with the original 151 Pokémon from the first generation. As Pokémania died off toward the end of the second generation of Gold, Silver, and Crystal, Pokémon and Nintendo as a whole entered a very experimental phase with the introduction of the Game Boy Advance and the GameCube. This innovative phase is where we saw a lot of the biggest departures in Nintendo's flagship titles. We saw Super Mario Sunshine with the introduction of Flood and the water mechanics. We saw The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess from Legend of Zelda. Metroid Prime being the first and only series of Metroid that are first-person shooters. And the third generation of Pokemon. This era of Nintendo is where I personally hold the most nostalgia. Me being around 5 years old at the time that the third generation was ushered in, this is also where I found my love for gaming, and I still play through Pokemon Emerald around once a year. The third generation takes place in Hoenn, a faraway region with much more diverse flora and fauna from the first two generations, which were essentially two provinces in the same country. This is where they also introduced abilities for every Pokemon as well as the double battle mechanic. But this isn't where the innovation stops for Pokemon. Nintendo wanted to push the franchise into the home console market, so Nintendo helped found a small company underneath them to help create the first fully-fledged Pokemon RPG for home consoles. That company was Genius Sonority. With a development team of just over 20 people, Genius Sonority took the double battle mechanic introduced in Ruby and Sapphire and ran with it for the first game in this company's history. In this video, I will be going over the story, gameplay mechanics, and plot points of Pokémon Colosseum to find out whether or not the game is really as good as I remember it being. This game could drink in the United States at this point, but as always with these types of videos, there is going to be a lot of spoilers, so there's your warning, I guess. But before we get into the review, I just want to thank you guys for clicking on this video. I've been really enjoying making these review types of videos, and I plan on streaming the games that I want to review in the future, so if you want more of that, be sure to subscribe. And with all that out of the way, let's get into the review. Pokemon Colosseum has one of the craziest intros of any game in the series, with the main protagonist blowing a hole in the wall of a hideout of these identical NPCs, and stealing a machine from them before blowing up the rest of the building and riding off into the desert. You ride off to the outskirts stand before you pass these two guys talking about how much they ate at the restaurant before heading off to report to their boss. We head into the restaurant and see a news anchor on the TV reporting on the literal act of terrorism the protagonist just committed. This guy Willie challenges you to a battle when you leave the restaurant, and you're introduced to the double battle mechanic in this game, and your starter Pokemon, Umbreon and Espeon. This is a very basic tutorial battle, not much to say here. He's got a couple Zigzagoons that go down really easily, but after you beat him, Willie tells us we should go to Fenac City to face off against some stronger trainers. But when we get there, we meet back up with the two guys that were at Outskirts Stand. There are these shouts coming from inside the bag they're carrying, and these goobers just drop the body bag before challenging us to a battle. There's not much to say about this battle either. These guys go down just as easy as the other one. And after you take him out, some of the pedestrians come to check out what all the commotion is about. The voice from the bag shouts out, "Robbers!" But one of the guys replies, "We're not robbers, we're kidnappers." Like that makes it any better. And the two guys run off, just leaving the bag. We let the girl out of the bag after we untie it, and we get to name this girl, which, I mean, is strange, but I guess she forgot her name after getting dropped on her head or something. But the people in the city that came to check out what all the commotion was about say that we should probably report this crime to the mayor of the city. And as we get to the mayor's house, someone who's definitely not an evil villain is exiting the building. He says, "I have a feeling I'll be seeing you again somewhere," before walking off. Yeah, subtlety's never been Nintendo's strong suit, so we report the incident to the mayor and he assures us that he's going to look into it. But while he does, he says we should check out the Colosseum challenge up at the north side of town. Unfortunately, when we get to the Colosseum, we're a little bit too late to enter the competition, and when we leave, we see some of the identical NPCs from the intro who out us as an ex-Team Snag'em member. We presumably quit because we didn't want to shave our heads and put on this dorky outfit, which seems to be a contractual obligation to join the team. They also call us a snagger, which I'm pretty sure is a racial slur in this region. Rui calls these guys creeps, and the most deprived one of the three attacks us. And after you vaporize this guy's 2 Pokemon team, Rui calls us her gallant prince and demands we go shopping for Pokeballs. Problem is, they don't sell Pokeballs in this city, and the game just kind of expects you to talk to this NPC in the back of the shop, who gives you the information that they sell Pokeballs back at the outskirts stand. Which brings me to my first kind of criticism of this game. At a lot of points throughout this story, they're not very clear on what you're supposed to do next. They just kind of leave it up to you to find out. Like, I talked to the shopkeeper and found out they don't sell Pokeballs in Fenac City, so I tried to leave town, but Rui stopped me and said, no, we need to go shopping for Pokeballs. So I went back to the shop to try and figure it out, and until you talk to this specific NPC, you can't leave the city or progress the story. It would have made so much more sense if we talked to the shopkeeper and he was like, oh, sorry, we're out of stock, but I know this one spot back in the outskirts stand that probably has some Pokeballs. But no, you have to talk to this lady NPC, like, in the back of the shop that's kind of hidden away. It's just a random, weird thing. Like, why? Why do I have to talk to her? Anyways, we head back to the outskirts stand and buy a couple Pokeballs and go back to Fenac City, where in that short amount of time, the 2 dudes that kidnapped Rui came back to the city with a bunch of members from their team. And here's where we're introduced to the best character in the entire franchise. This guy's a disco maniac dressed in all gold with a massive Pokeball afro, and he's also got some of the most flamboyant dialogue out of any character in any Pokemon game. I haven't met a single person who's played this game that doesn't love Mirror B. But after our introduction, he runs off and we fight his henchmen again, which are easy to beat once again. But this time we also have to fight both of them, and the second battle is our introduction to the other main mechanic of this game, Shadow Pokemon. In this game, there aren't any wild Pokemon, and the only way you can expand your team is by snagging Shadow Pokemon from trainers who have them. I actually really like this mechanic and how it weaves in with the story of this game, as well as the region of this game being this big desert that you wouldn't expect to have too much flora and fauna in it. That being said, the shadow mechanic in this game is extremely half-baked and full of flaws, but it gets pretty much entirely fixed in the sequel to this game. There's only one shadow move in this game, Shadow Rush, and it does neutral damage to every type across the board, but it also does recoil to the user, so it's essentially just struggle. Using Shadow Rush has the chance to put your shadow Pokemon into a state called Hyper Mode. The Pokemon's nature determines how likely using the move will put your Pokemon into Hyper Mode, but when entering Hyper Mode, your Pokemon loses a turn, and in order to calm the Pokemon down, you need to use the call feature in the battle menu. So you essentially lose 2 turns if you don't want to be stuck in Hyper Mode. While in Hyper Mode, your Pokemon has a 95% chance to land a critical hit while using Shadow Rush, but it's also way more likely to miss the move entirely. It will also disobey you if you want to use any other type of move, and you can't use items while a Pokemon is in Hyper Mode. This means a Pokemon that enters Hyper Mode misses a turn and then is encored into using Struggle until you want to miss another turn. This condition doesn't go away after you end the battle either, so most of the time it's just better to miss 2 turns back to back. The one silver lining to this feature is that calling your Pokemon out of Hyper Mode will lower the heart gauge a little bit, but overall a Pokemon entering Hyper Mode is like a net negative. Each Shadow Pokemon has a heart gauge where the experience bar is on other Pokemon. Shadow Pokemon will bank their experience they gain in battle until their heart gauge is completely empty and the Pokemon gets purified. And this is all good because Shadow Pokemon tend to be like higher levels than regular Pokemon in this game, but moving around in the overworld doesn't deplete a Pokemon's heart gauge like it does in the sequel, which means unless a Pokemon is at the front of your party entering Hyper Mode constantly and then getting called out of it, the process of lowering a Pokemon's heart gauge can be pretty tedious. Like I said, Shadow Rush does recoil and this Makuhita KO'd itself, so I had to restart. Which brings me to my next complaint. And I promise you this whole video isn't going to be me complaining about Pokémon Colosseum. I actually do quite like this game, but the only way to save your progress in this game is through the PC. I have no idea who thought this was a good idea or why they put this in the game, or if this was like a result of time constraints or something, but you could save your progress anywhere in the world in red and blue. So like, I don't understand where this decision came from. This was another flaw that was fixed in the sequel. Anyways, I caught the Makuhita the second time around, and heading outside, we see the red, blue, and green Power Rangers that Mirror B was with. Each one of these guys has a shadow Pokemon of one of the Gen 2 starters. I chose Croconaw because Surf in this game hits both enemies but doesn't hit your ally, which is super useful for double battles. But I accidentally KO'd the Croconaw, so I had to restart. But I caught it the second time, no need to worry. After beating Mr. Blue, Rui says they probably headed out to Pyrite Town, so that's where we head next. But we can't quite get there unless we stop at this random construction site first. Pyrite Town is a super dingy slum town in the middle of the desert, and as soon as you arrive, you see this police officer interrogating this random citizen. One of the first buildings you'll see walking into this city is a fortune teller, and inside is another instance of this game's goofy ass writing. The guy inside talks about how great the town fortune teller is because she told him where his wife went after she divorced him, and then he starts just sobbing. A little further into this town is the battle square, and each of these trainers has a shadow Pokemon for you to capture. The options are really limited in this game, and a lot of these Pokemon just aren't good, so you really just have to work with whatever they give you in this game. A little deeper into this city is KingK's office. KingK is basically the mayor of this city, and there's this kid in his office that's like, I'm playing lookout, don't look behind this bookshelf here. There's nothing behind there, don't worry about it. So naturally, you look behind it, and there's a cave behind there that is full of kids. What the fuck is going on here, KingK? When you exit the cave, this other kid named Silva is giving the gears to KingK about how he's just let this town go to shit because he's allowing Mirror B to just run his shadow Pokemon operation here before Silva runs off. Now there's rumors around town that the prize for winning the Colosseum challenge here is a shadow Pokemon. And after going back to the guy that the police officer was interrogating, the camera pans up to Mirror B's office. He's in the middle of a Zoom call with the guy we saw from Fenax City, who definitely isn't evil, talking about how they're almost ready for the final phase of their plan to take effect. So our next course of action is to take the Colosseum challenge, but before we can get there, this dude hobbles out of the factory and falls to the ground. Turns out Silva, the kid who was yelling at KingK earlier, stole a gear from the factory that powers the town, and now we're tasked with finding the gear before the entire town loses power. So you might be asking, are there any leads on where this gear could be? Can you point me in the right direction? Is it even in Pyrite City? The answer is a resounding no to all of these. The game doesn't tell you anything about where to go once again. None of the guys in the factory have any idea where to go. You head back to KingK's office, maybe he has an idea. Nope, he doesn't tell you anything about it. Hell, even the fortune teller tells you to wait because she's not done talking to this guy about his fucking divorced wife. So where do you go? Back to the construction site, obviously. What are you, stupid? It's so fucking obvious. So we get the gear, bring it back to the windmill, and restore power to the town. KingK says he wants us to take the Colosseum challenge because after returning the gear to him and taking part in no Pokemon battles, he can tell that we're a powerful trainer or whatever. And he wants us to figure out what Mirror B's plan is with all these shadow Pokemon in his town. Dude, aren't you the fucking mayor of this place or the leader of this city? Like, can't you figure this shit out? Anyways, we head to the Colosseum and finally enter our first tournament. The first battles aren't too difficult as you'd expect. They're around the same level as your shadow Pokemon, but your starters are probably getting a little underleveled at this point. Once you win the tournament, you get a cash prize and a TM, similar to the gyms in the mainline series of games. But when you exit the building, one of those weird Power Ranger guys brings you to the building that was previously locked off because it was Mirror B's hideout, to give you the shadow Pokemon as a prize. But once you enter the building, they realize that you're the guy that Mirror B's been warning everyone about, and they battle you. After beating them, KingK and a couple of the kids from his weird cave dungeon follow you in here, and it turns out Mirror B has taken KingK's Plusle, and they ask you to go get it for him. So we battle our way to the top of the building where Mirror B and Nascor were having their Zoom call, and you find Silva, who just got his ass whooped by 2 girls. This must have given the women some blind confidence to think they could beat up a full-grown man this time, so we have to remind them that they get equal rights and lefts in this region. So they use their Ultra Super Fire Dash move to run away, and Mirror B pops up on the TV. He's broadcasting live from his man cave, and he says he's waiting for us and to come find him. So we head into the cave, take out the couple guards he has posted up inside, and when we get to him, he's just having a dance party with a bunch of his Ludicolo. Like seriously, how can you not love this guy? This is the first fight in the game that's actually pretty difficult, mainly because his Pokemon are pretty bulky, and high leveled for this part of the game. They summon rain and they heal from it, but they also have moves like Mega Drain and Leech Seed that just sap your health. And Water Grass is just such a strange type to deal with when you don't have a useful flying type. The only option you have is Noctowl, but at this point in the game, there's no way that you lowered its heart gauge enough for it to know Fly. So I lost. But I won the second time, and I even captured his Shadow Ludicolo, which probably not gonna use because it's not a good Pokemon. Hey yo, what the fuck are you doing there, bro? Chill. So after you defeat Mirror B and you rescue Duking's Pokemon for him, he immediately just gives it away to us. Even though we didn't ask for it. Plusle is just an objectively bad Pokemon that's even worse when you realize there's no Minun in this game to pair it up with. Why would I ever fucking want this thing? It's going straight to the PC. It's going straight to the PC. So we head out of town, but before we can leave, the fortune teller calls us over. I guess she got tired of telling that guy his wife is never coming back to him, and she gives us a lead on where we should go to purify our shadow Pokemon. The only place in the entire region with green grass and trees. Agate Village. Conveniently, this is also where Rui's grandparents live, so she says that we should pay them a visit while we're there. The shop in Agate sells scents, which can be used to lower your shadow Pokemon's heart gauge. The only problem is you don't have a cologne case to hold your scents, and the game doesn't tell you where you can get the cologne case. So I just went through the entire game without it. I know where to get it now, because I looked it up after I beat the game, but you get the cologne case from a random NPC in this town after you beat a boss from an area that we haven't been to yet. Once again, there's no one in this game that gives you a clue on where to get this cologne case, and they expect you to just come back here and talk to random NPCs after you've already been here one time already. But we visit Rui's grandparents, and someone runs into their house saying that some shady people have invaded the shrine. So we go to investigate, and wouldn't you know it, some more Cypher goons. After taking them out and making it to the shrine, this dude with a horn on his helmet is fighting Egan. And we have to watch his Pikachu get fucking decimated in 2 hits after Egan talks so much shit about how he used to be the best trainer in the world. So we step in to do what Egan couldn't, and we catch the Shadow Hitmontop. After we beat the Power Ranger, he said he's heading to Mount Battle to report to this dude named Dakim, and we were brought back to Rui's grandparents' house. His Pikachu calls us something I know is a racial slur in this region, and we get an email from Duking saying we need to head to Mount Battle because it's under attack. But that can wait for a minute because I have some Pokemon that need purification. So we purify Croconaw, Quagsire, and Misdreavus, and Croconaw evolves into Feraligatr, and then we head to Mount Battle. This is the place that you go to grind in this game. It's a 100-floor dungeon that progressively gets a little more difficult, and at the end of each 10-floor segment is like a mini boss of sorts. I'm guessing the first people in this segment have either been replaced by Cypher Grunts that just aren't wearing costumes, or people that are completely oblivious that their livelihoods are at risk, because they try to stop us from getting to the people who are actively trying to take over the mountain. But we make it to the 10th floor, and this 9-foot-tall dude with the most ripped back on the planet just flatlines this other guy in an act of pure roid rage before turning around and attacking us. He's one of Cypher's top dogs, and he's got a fucking Shadow Entei on his team. So naturally, I spend about 5 minutes just throwing balls at this thing, and it ends up KOing itself with recoil damage from Shadow Rush. So I have to reset. So I try a second time, and it uses Shadow Rush and KOs itself with recoil again. So I try a third time, and this time I'm too afraid to, bring its health down below like 1/3 HP, but I managed to catch it while it's in yellow HP. Furious at what happened, Dakim tries to suck his own wang to calm himself down, but he can't because his hulking back has lost all flexibility. So with nothing left to live for, he throws himself off the platform and jumps to his death. After giving CPR to the guy that Dakim laid out earlier, we managed to bring him back to life, and he gives us the Time Flute, which can be used to completely lower a Shadow Pokemon's heart gauge. And we are once again left with no idea where to go or what to do next. So we head back to Agate Village and tell Egan that we got a Time Flute, and he tells us to summon Celebi with it. But I don't really want to use the Time Flute right now, so I just leave Agate Village. Leaving Agate, you'll notice there's a new spot on the map you can travel to, but when you get there, it's impossible to do anything. Duking then sends you an email that the police in Pyrite arrested the girls who beat up Silva earlier, but they can't get any information out of them, so Duking wants us to interrogate them for some reason. So we go to the jail in Pyrite and just fucking pickpocket the one girl who is sleeping, and we take a key for the elevator in Mirror B's hideout that leads to a place called the Under. Within a few seconds of us being in the Under, there's a news report on this massive screen by this lady Venus saying that there's some spies in the Under and that everyone needs to be on the lookout. How could they possibly know this? It hasn't even been 30 seconds. Inside the shop in the Under is my favorite NPC in this game. He's just this old guy that wants you to listen to a story of his. But when you say no, he's like, young people are in such a rush. Fine, I'll be in a rush too. And then he just convulses. I don't even know what this is. If you leave the area and come back, like, he's still doing it too, and he refuses to talk to you once he starts. Anyways, we head into the scrap shop on the other side of town, and there's this kid who's working with Silva and the other kids from King's Cave. Turns out there's this whole underground syndicate these kids are running called the Kids Grid, and they're all trying to take down Cypher. But this kid wants us to deliver a machine part to their base for him. So we go there, and these kids already know who we are somehow, but we deliver the power-up part, and when we exit the building, we see Silva getting captured by some more Cypher peons. So now we have to fight these two grunts back to back, and I actually got cheesed out by the second one. At this point, I didn't have anything to deal with grass types because I didn't use the time flute on Entei like a dumbass. So I only had Shadow Rush, so I was like stun locked into going into hyper mode and calling my Pokemon and then getting paralyzed and dealing with paralysis hacks. So I lost, but the fight doesn't actually matter and the plot progresses either way. Silva somehow manages to give you a disc for the platform on the north side of town, despite his hands being bound and there being a fence between both of us. And this platform takes us to the news station that Venus was broadcasting from. She obviously recognizes us as the spies that she warned everyone about, and she says she'll beat us for her Master Nascore. I actually found this boss fight pretty easy, and by that I mean I lost. But on our second fight, she sent out a Shadow Suicune, which I caught in the first ball, so, you know, easy. So Venus runs off and we give chase, and she goes down this big elevator, which we can't call back up. So we have to take the stairs, and there's conveniently a trainer placed on every one of these little landing areas. At the bottom of the stairs is the entrance to this underground subway station, so we chase Venus through the subway and meet her on the other side, where she says, "You didn't think I would let you use our train, did you? I have the key right here," before running out of the train station. But once again, when you give chase to her and exit the train station, she dropped the key. What is with like Pokemon villains and just dropping crucial items that like their organization needs to survive? Anyways, and on the other side are these two grunts that are like, "Oh no, it's fucking you. You made it to this side. We can't let you into our lab." And you know, usually this is where a Pokemon battle would happen, but no, these guys just run off and blow a massive fissure into the floor of their building. Even the other grunt is like, "Hey dude, don't you think that was a little overkill?" And these guys also left the key to the main gate of the research lab on the side that we're on, so we just take that and go. So we're 2 for 2 for incompetent people who definitely shouldn't be holding on to keys. Either way, we head to the main entrance of their lab and start the Raid the Evil Team segment that's in basically every Pokemon game at this point. A lot of these grunts are exactly what you'd expect, not over-leveled or challenging at all, but there are a couple Shadow Pokemon you can catch here. I caught a Fortress and a Grand Bull, but I got screwed by Paralysis in Hyper Mode when I was fighting the only trainer with a Shadow Pokemon I really wanted in this area, this Vibrava. In order to get through the Cypher base, you need to get these 3 DNA segments that hold the password to get through the door. Now you could do that, or you could do what I did, which is get 2 of the segments, run around the base for like 5 minutes, give up on finding the 3rd one, and then brute force your way through the door with like a Hydra tool. Remember kids, it's not illegal if it's under the guise of ethical hacking. Past the door is the 3rd Cypher admin, I'm. And this is the guy who does the majority of the research on Shadow Pokemon for Cypher. He also has a team that makes me want to shit in my hand and clap. This guy has 2 Rain Setters, a Dragon type in Altaria, and a Golbat that spams Confusion and fucking Toxic. If you want to use Thunder or an Electric type move at all for that matter, this guy has a Lantern with Lightning Rod that gives it complete immunity to Electric type moves. That is, if you somehow have an Electric type at this point. The icing on the cake is this Shadow Raikou, which, you guessed it, has Thunder, which is stab boosted and never misses because of the rain. So like, how do you counter this, you might be asking? Do you use the Shadow Piloswine that you had earlier? The only ground type option that you have in the game aside from like Quagsire, which I might add won't be purified at this point? No, because you'll be dealing with Hyper Mode the entire time. Also, a 3rd of his team is water types, so good luck there. How about using a grass type? Oh, like Suicune or Bayleaf, which are the only grass types that you have access to at this point? Well, no, because Skiploom is a flying type as well, which is is weak to thunder, and it also has a fucking 340 base stat total, so garbage. So I hope you chose Bayleaf, which is objectively the worst out of the 3 Gen 2 starters. Seriously, this guy uses Toxic, Confusion, Flinch, Paralysis, Rain, Thunder, and a fucking legendary Pokemon on his team. All of this is on top of his Pokemon being like 10 levels higher than yours. And the Hyper Mode mechanic, which is constantly working against you on this game. What is the strategy for this fight? Like item spam? Grind at Mount Battle? Like, nah, fuck that, dude. I had to retry this fight 6 times. And after beating Ein, the kid from the Under tells you to bring the data ROM that you found on his desk back to him. So you bring the data ROM back to him and he goes, this is a list of shadow Pokemon, but it looks like all the data's been wiped from the file. You can leave this with me while I try and recover some of the data. All right? So where do I go now? Can anyone point me in the right direction? Maybe I do the Colosseum challenge? No, that can't be right. These Pokemon are like 20 levels higher than mine. No, there's no way the level curve is that steep. No, this is an optional Colosseum. There's only one mandatory Colosseum in the game called Pokémon Colosseum. I guess that's not entirely true because they want you to go back to the construction site from the beginning of the game. The construction's now finished and it's this new Cypher base and they've made a Colosseum on top of this tower. In order to get to the Colosseum, you need to rematch all of the Cypher admins again and get the red, blue, green, and yellow cards to activate the orbs at the middle of the station and then take the elevator up to the top. But before you can go into the Colosseum, look, you're stopped by the leader of Team Snag'em, and he reveals they've been a branch of Cypher this whole time. I mean, they're the only ones snagging Pokemon, right? So it would make sense that Cypher got the Pokemon from them to turn them into shadow Pokemon, right? Like that makes sense? But anyways, this guy has a Shadow Skarmory, which is my favorite flying type Pokemon, so I really wanted to catch it. So I tried, and 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 tried. But it broke out of every single Pokeball that I had, and I didn't want to use my Master Ball on it, so I had to kill it. That's cool, dude. I loved that. All right, up the ladder to the Colosseum. This is essentially this game's Elite Four. We made it to the end, folks. And I lost. But the second time I beat them, and oh shit, would you look at that? It's the guy that definitely wasn't an evil villain the whole time. You mean to tell me this guy with glowing red eyes and tendrils for hair that blow in the non-existent wind that we've seen talking to every Cypher admin up to this point in the game was evil? Yeah, he is. And he beat me. I lost. So I tried again and I lost in the Elite Four. Again. So then I went up 70 floors in Mount Battle to train up my team. And the fun part about Mount Battle in this game is that after every fight, before you go up to the next floor, it asks you if you want to continue. So I had to say, yes, I want to continue 70 times. But now I felt ready. So I took the Colosseum challenge again, and I actually won the whole thing. But when I checked the recording, it was just a black screen, so I had to do it again. So when I challenged him again, Nascor didn't have his fancy Shadow Metagross because I stole it from him. And I won again. After we beat Nascor, he challenges us to like trial by combat or something. He says he wants to fight again. But we're in the wrong sort of Colosseum for that, so the mayor of Fenax City stops him. And Rui is like, "Mayor, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm the secret leader of Cypher, you stupid girl." What? You mean to tell me the mayor of Fenac, who's had Cypher members in his office every single time we've gone to visit him, is actually a member of Cypher? No way! Nah, but in all reality, when I was a kid, I had no idea that this was gonna happen. I actually think it's a decent enough twist for a Pokemon game. This dude also has a pretty tough team that's all around level 60, and the majority of his team is like competitively viable and have setup moves. He also has like healing items and X items, but whenever he uses his X items, he'll use them on both of his active team members at the same time, which is like the worst thing to do. So he just gives up like a full turn, and most of the time we'll end up with both of his Mons getting KO'd. But I beat him for a second time, and usually he has a Shadow Tyranitar, but I caught it last time on the recording that didn't work. so he has this Aggron instead. After you beat him, the cops from Pyrite show up, but the floating fat guy summons a weird helicopter to come pick him up, despite there being like 10 people he'd have to get through in order to get into the helicopter. But before the helicopter can land, it gets struck with an ICBM missile, and the shrapnel falls into the crowded building, killing thousands. Turns out a Ho-Oh shot down the helicopter, and no one will ever know how it got the nuclear launch codes because it flew off before we could interrogate it. Rui tells us how cool we look one last time, and the credits roll. And that was Pokémon Colosseum. So, what are my final thoughts on this game? I think for a first try at a new spin on the Pokémon formula, this game did a pretty good job. Although they did leave a lot to be desired when it comes to team building options. I mean, when you account for post-game encounters, there are only 48 usable Pokémon, and being honest, a lot of them are really, really bad. Like, how am I supposed to build a good team with Apom and Sunflora and fucking Dunsparce, Delibird, Quillfish, Ledian, Gligar, and there are so many more that are just complete busters that you would never use in a mainline Pokemon game. I can appreciate the fact that a lack of options requires you to think outside the box and use Pokemon that you wouldn't normally use, but when you fill the catchable Pokemon roster with just garbage, and then also add the 3 legendary beasts to the game, well, you already know what half of my party is going to be. The shadow mechanic is a super interesting twist on the gameplay loop of Pokemon, but at times it really just feels half-baked. Entering hyper mode, making you miss a turn, and then locking you out of other moves and using items, as well as making you miss the only move you can use more often is just bad game design, and it's where a lot of the difficulty in this game comes from. But the writing in this game is some of the best in the series. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's not afraid to kind of be a little weird, as well as the introduction to my favorite groovy antagonist, Mirror B. It's just a great example of out-of-the-box thinking. So, is Pokémon Colosseum as good as I remember? Not really, but it's definitely not a bad game by any means. This game definitely has its flaws, and at times it can feel a little bit rushed or unfinished, but this game laid out the groundwork for one of my favorite games in the entire series. The sequel of this game, Pokémon XD Gale of Darkness, which is an overall more well-rounded, thought-out game. Or did they? Maybe one day I'll go back and see if they really did fix all those flaws, or if my mind is just being warped by nostalgia like it kinda was for Pokémon Colosseum. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to this point, be sure to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more of these stupid reviews that I've been making. If you did enjoy this video, I have a fat fucking review of Sea of Stars that you'll probably enjoy as well. It'll be on the screen somewhere over here, but that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video.